The cuffs were cold in a way that felt personal, like winter had learned her name. Althea Rains held her wrist still because she knew what movement did to a night like this. Movement made people nervous, nervousness made fingers tighten, tight fingers made everything worse, so she let the metal sit and watched her hands as if they belonged to someone else. Her porch light burned behind her steady for once, pouring pale gold over the steps and the worn welcome mat. "You need to calm down," the younger officer said. "More supposed to soften." It landed like a lid. "I am calm," Althea answered, and heard how gentle her own voice was, the voice she used in conference rooms, the voice that said, "Breathe, you can still fix this." The older officer shifted his flashlight, drifting over her front door, over the brass numbers 214. "Hands behind your back," he said, as if they weren't already there. Althea didn't argue. There were two ways to survive certain moments: speak until you drowned, or let silence become a wall you could lean on. She leaned. An hour ago she had been driving home with a grocery bag on the passenger seat and the smell of rotisserie chicken filling the car ordinary warm. She'd been thinking about a voicemail from her mother and whether she had the energy to call back tonight. Blue lights bloomed in her mirror and the ordinary slid off her like water. She had done everything right: signal, pull over, window down, hands visible, the old discipline in her bones, the part that still believed rules were a shield. Evening, the older officer had said license and registration. Of course she'd replied, reaching slowly, and then because she could not stop herself from wanting clarity, she'd said, "May I ask why I've been stopped?" The pause that followed was small, but it changed the temperature of the air. "Don't get smart." Smart like a question was an insult, like curiosity was a threat. "I'm not," she'd said, "I just want to understand." "Step out of the vehicle." That was how it started, not with shouting, with a tone that turned a person into a problem. Now on her porch she could still smell the chicken in the distance, cooling in the car into something sad. The thought made her chest tighten. Hunger was not allowed right now. Nothing soft was allowed. Across the street, curtains shifted, a silhouette paused, then disappeared. The neighborhood stayed quiet in that careful way, the way people do when they don't want to be seen, wanting to help. The younger officer, Harrow on the name tag, stood a few feet away, his hand hovering near his belt as if the night might jump. He looked young enough that his face still had room for surprise. Just once he met her eyes and looked away like he couldn't stand what he saw there. He tried again, lower. "We're just doing our job." Something inside Althea cracked, slow and soundless. She had done her job most of her life. Job meant rooms where you chose words like bandages. Job meant learning to keep your voice steady when your chest wanted to split open. Job could be a prayer. Job could be an excuse. "You followed me home," she said. "We escorted you," the older officer corrected. "You were being uncooperative." Uncooperative, the word landed on her tongue like grit. Althea closed her eyes for one breath. She saw a younger version of herself practicing a neutral expression so no one could call her angry. She heard a tired voice from long ago, "Don't apologize for breathing." When she opened her eyes again, she looked at her door. Just wood and paint, just a lock. She trusted the house held still, like it didn't know whether to shelter her or betray her. "Who did you call?" Harrow asked. The question slipped out too fast, like he'd meant to keep it inside. Althea stared at him. Her phone was still in her pocket. She could feel its weight against her thigh. She hadn't touched it. She hadn't needed to. "I didn't call anyone," she said. The older officer made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Sure." Headlights turned at the end of the block. One car slowed, then another behind it. Not the casual roll of neighbors coming home late, but a measured approach, as if the street itself had become a corridor. Althea felt it before she understood it. Vibration underfoot, a low humming presence, more engines, more weight, the kind of arrival that asked the world to step aside. The first dark vehicle stopped at the curb in front of her house, unmarked windows tinted like sealed water. Another pulled in behind it, then another, neat as a line of commas. The blue from the patrol car strobed across their sides and slid off. A door opened, not slammed, opened, careful. A man stepped out in a dark coat, his posture composed in the way people learn when they've spent years entering rooms where everyone is watching. He did not rush. He looked straight at Althea, and something in his face tightened, not with anger but with sorrow. He stopped at the edge of her porch light. He lifted his hand, palm out, not to the officers but to her, a small human gesture that said, "I see you." The older officer drew a breath. "Who the?" The man's voice cut in, quiet as paper and sharp enough to change the room the street had become. "Brigadier General Althea Rains," he said, using her full name like a key in a lock. "We've been trying to reach you." Althea swallowed the cuffs bit as her hands tensed. Despite her will, Harrow's face drained, the color sliding away as if someone had opened a drain in him. The man shifted slightly and the porch light caught his badge, small letters, clean and undeniable. The word General did not change the night. It did not rearrange the stars or quiet the hum of engines. It landed, and everything waited to see what it would do next. Althea felt the title like a coat she had hung on a chair years ago. It was still hers. It did not warm her now. Harrow's hand trembled. He took half a step back as if space itself had become a rule he'd forgotten. The older officer stared at the badge, then at Althea, then at the cuffs on her wrists. His mouth opened and closed once no sound came out. The man from the dark vehicles did not move closer. He let the pause breathe. He knew the weight of silence, knew how long it took for truth to reach the surface without being yanked. He said again, softer, we can take those off. Althea did not nod. She did not shake her head. She stared at the grain in the porch railing where years ago she'd pressed her cheek waiting for her father to come home late from a job that never paid enough. She remembered how it could feel warm even in winter if you leaned long enough. She thought absurdly of the chicken cooling, becoming a loss she would not reclaim. Harrow swallowed. Sir, I didn't know. The older officer cut him a look sharp with fear. We didn't know anything, he said quickly. We were responding to a traffic violation. She was uncooperative. Uncooperative again. The word reached for her like a habit. The man with the badge inclined his head. I'm sure this happens sometimes, he said, and did not sound convinced or angry. He sounded tired in a way Althea recognized, the tired that came from carrying rooms full of stories that never ended well. He looked at her hands. May I? She nodded once, the smallest motion. The click of metal opening sounded too loud. It echoed in places inside her that had learned to brace. She flexed her fingers. Blood rushed back with pins and needles, pain blooming like a bruise you didn't know you'd earned. She kept her hands close to her body like they might drift away. There was a breath where no one spoke. The neighborhood held it. The engines idled patient. Althea stepped back onto her porch. The boards creaked in familiar complaint. The house exhaled as she crossed the threshold of light. It did not fix anything. It only meant she was where she belonged. I asked a question, she said quietly, and surprised herself by speaking at all. I asked why. Her voice shook now, not with fear but with the aftershock of restraint. Her chest ached from holding back words like breath underwater. The older officer opened his mouth then closed it. He looked older suddenly, as if the night had taken something from him and left it heavy in his bones. Harrow stared at the ground. I'm sorry, he said, and the words were real and small and insufficient. Althea nodded. Because sometimes you let people keep their apologies. She did not forgive, she did not condemn, she simply existed. The man with the badge stepped closer, now careful not to crowd. She could smell his aftershave, something clean and ordinary. He held her phone out to her. I believe this is yours. It rang while you were on the roadside, we answered. She took it. Her mother's name glowed on the screen. Missed call. The ache sharpened. Is she? He began. She's fine, Althea said, though she did not know yet. She would find out later. In a kitchen with a chair pulled out just enough to lean on. The man nodded. We'll escort you inside if you'd like. Inside meant walls and quiet, and the sink with a drip she kept forgetting to fix. Inside meant space to feel what she had postponed. Yes, she said. As they turned, the older officer cleared his throat. So protocol requires a report. Of course, the man replied evenly. We'll file ours too. The implication hung without accusation. Two truths would exist. They always did. At the door, Althea paused. She looked back at the street, at the cars, at Harrow's bowed head, at the older officer's rigid shoulders. She felt no triumph, no justice, only a thin grief for how narrow the passage had been between ordinary and disaster. She unlocked the door. The familiar click steadied her. The house smelled like soap and yesterday's rain and something faintly floral from a candle she never lit. When the door closed behind her, the noise dropped away as if someone had turned down the world. She leaned her forehead against the wood. The cool seeped in. Thank you, she said to the man, because gratitude was still a reflex. He did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was low and human. We'll be outside for a bit. He hesitated. Then I'm sorry this happened. So am I, she said, and meant more than this night. He left the door shut again, softer this time. Althea stood alone. Her hands shook now freely. She pressed them together until the trembling slowed. She slid down the door and sat on the floor. The house held her weight. Her phone buzzed again. She did not answer, yet she listened to her own breathing until it remembered its rhythm. Outside engines stayed on the porch. Light burned inside. A woman sat with the quiet knowledge that titles could open doors but they could not close wounds. First the pale stripe of light under the blinds, then the kettle's quiet groan as the house warmed, then the ache in Althea's wrists where metal had been, and the faint smell of rotisserie chicken that had never made it inside. She had slept on the couch without meaning to, her boots still on one heel hanging off like she'd been caught mid-escape, a thin blanket pulled up to her collarbone as if her body had tried to comfort itself while her mind refused. For a few seconds she did not remember, then memory returned the way cold water returns when a shower shifts from warm to wrong. Porch light, cuffs, the word general spoken like a switch flipped in the dark. She sat up slowly, the room tilted not from dizziness but from the weight of the night still hanging in the corners. She pressed her palms against her thighs and felt the tremor, then not panic exactly, more like the body refusing to pretend anymore. The phone lay face down on the coffee table, a small black rectangle that had become a witness. She turned it over and saw her mother's name again and again, a cluster of calls stacked like pleading. Althea stared at the screen until her eyes blurred. She thought of her mother's voice when it turned soft the way it did when she was trying not to frighten anyone. She thought of how her mother still said baby sometimes, as if Althea had not outgrown it by decades. She did not want to hear it. She wanted to protect her mother from the story by keeping it locked inside herself. But the lock had already failed last night. The story had been outside under flashing lights for anyone to see. She called. It rang once, twice. Oh, thank God, her mother said, too fast, too loud, and then the breath broke behind it. Althea, where are you? Where are you? I'm home, Althea answered. Her own voice sounded distant, like it belonged to a different woman in a different house. Home, home, her mother repeated, and there was a shuddering inhale like her lungs had been holding on for hours. I heard from someone, not from you, first from a number I didn't recognize, and then I called you and called you and... I'm sorry, Althea said, because apology was also a reflex. Don't you apologize, her mother snapped, and then immediately softened. I'm not mad at you, I can't, I saw your face in my head and it wouldn't stop. Althea closed her eyes. The couch fabric scratched the back of her neck. The room smelled like dust and lemon cleaner and the faint sweetness of the candle she never lit. It was a traffic stop, she said carefully. It became something else. A traffic stop, her mother echoed and laughed once without humor. Baby, that's never just a traffic stop for us, you know that. Althea's throat tightened. The words for what she knew had been living in her for years like a stone. She had built a life around it and called the shape stability. I asked why they stopped me, she said. I asked politely. I said, may I ask why? And then? Then what? Then everything went cold. Her mother made a small sound like a hand pressed to the mouth to keep grief from spilling too loudly into the world. Oh, Althea. The name in her mother's voice was not the name people used on television or in halls. It was the name wrapped in bedtime stories and kitchen steam and the careful lessons of a childhood shaped by both love and warnings. They put you in cuffs. Yes. Silence stretched so long Althea could hear the refrigerator cycling on and the distant bark of a dog outside that did not know anything about generals or convoys. Did you tell them who you were? Her mother asked finally. No, Althea said, and felt the truth of it like a bruise. I didn't want that to be the reason they stopped. Her mother's breath hitched. Baby, no. I wanted to be a person, Althea whispered. I wanted to be just someone driving home with dinner. Her mother cried, then quietly, not with sobs but with the sound of grief, trying to stay polite. Althea stared at the wall where a framed photo hung of her in uniform years ago, smiling too hard. Her mother had insisted on the photo, pride and proof. Now the photo looked like an accusation. After they got the cuffs off, her mother said, the question rough with need. What happened? Someone's FBI detail came to the house, Althea answered. Someone answered your call. My call? Her mother's voice sharpened. I called you, not them. I know. Then how? Althea did not tell her about the man's badge shining under porch light like a second moon. She did not tell her the way the convoy had been waiting already, as if the world had been holding its breath for her safety while she hadn't even known to inhale. She didn't know the whole truth either, not yet. I don't know, she admitted. They said they were trying to reach me. They said my phone rang. Her mother let out a shaky exhale. I hate that you had to be rescued. I hate that word, rescued, like you were a child lost in a mall. Althea swallowed. She stared at her wrists. The skin was intact, the inside was not. Me too, she said. When the call ended, her mother made her promise to eat and to lock the door and to call again later. Althea promised all of it with the voice she used when she needed the other person to believe she was okay. Afterward she sat with her phone in her lap and did nothing. The morning climbed higher and the light became honest. A knock came around noon, 3 gentle taps, then a pause, then 2 more, as if whoever stood there did not want to frighten her. Althea's body stiffened before her mind could decide. She walked to the door like she was approaching an animal that might bite. Through the peephole she saw Harrow. He stood on her porch in plain clothes, no uniform, no belt, just a wrinkled jacket and hands held open at his sides to show he carried nothing. His face looked smaller without the authority of blue fabric. His eyes looked exhausted in a way youth usually avoids. Althea's fingers hesitated on the lock. She did not owe him a door, she did not owe him anything. But she remembered his glance last night, the flash of something like shame before he looked away. She opened it, a cracked chain still on. Harrow began and then swallowed. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to see me, I needed to say something where it wasn't a report. Althea watched him through the narrow gap. The air between them smelled like cold and the faint detergent of his clothes. Say it, she said. His jaw worked like he was chewing glass. I thought I was doing it right, he said. I thought if I kept my voice calm and followed what I'd been taught, then nothing would go wrong, but it went wrong anyway. Althea did not move, her heart beat steady and heavy. I watched you stand there with cuffs on your porch, Harrow continued, and his voice cracked on porch like the word held the whole shame of it. I went home after and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I couldn't eat. I couldn't look at my own front door without thinking about yours. He blinked hard. I'm not asking you to forgive me, he said. I don't think I deserve that. I needed you to know I saw it when it was happening. I saw that it was wrong and I still didn't stop it fast enough. Althea's throat tightened again. She felt something sharp behind her ribs, not pity, not mercy, something closer to the ache of watching a young person realize the world had teeth. She looked at him a long time, then she said quietly, that's the part that keeps people alive, seeing it while it happens. Harrow's eyes filled and he looked down as if he couldn't bear to carry that sentence either. Althea reached up slowly and unhooked the chain. She opened the door wider, just enough for air to move between them. Not for him, not yet. For herself. Althea did not invite him in. She didn't step aside like the porch had become a hallway of reconciliation. She just left the door open and let the day touch them both. The wind moved through the gap and carried the smell of someone's lawn being cut and a faint bitterness from exhaust down the block. Ordinary scents trying to pretend nothing had happened. Harrow stood on the top step like he was afraid the boards might remember his boots from last night. I can go, he said quickly. I shouldn't have come, I just... Althea shook her head once. It wasn't permission, it was a pause. She watched his hands. He kept them visible as if he'd learned overnight what it meant to be afraid of being misunderstood. By a gesture he looked at her doorway and didn't cross the threshold. Good, she thought, not because she wanted to punish him but because she needed the boundary like a railing. If you came to tell me you're not like him, she said quietly, then don't. Harrow flinched as if the older officer's shadow had stepped on him. I'm not trying to separate myself from it, he whispered. I'm trying to stand inside it and not lie. Althea breathed in the air, tasted like metal. Even without cuffs she realized she had been tasting that since the stop, not in her mouth but behind her eyes. From down the street a car door closed. The sound was soft and yet her body tightened the way a muscle tightens before impact. She hated that. She hated the new reflex more than she hated the men who'd made it. Harrow noticed it flickered across his face, a shame too heavy for his age. I heard internal affairs will be involved, he said. There's going to be statements, it's going to be paperwork, she finished. His mouth twisted. Yes. Althea nodded. She had written reports, 2 pages where a life became bullet points. The old discipline in her wanted to prepare already, to control the narrative, to place each moment in the right order so it would be believed. But another part of her, the part that had been a girl with a mother teaching her how to keep her chin level, wanted to crawl under the couch and never speak again. I'm tired, she said. Harrow's eyes softened. I know. You don't know, she corrected, and then immediately regretted how sharp it sounded, but the truth was sharp too. It cut through politeness. Harrow swallowed. You're right, he said. I don't. Silence sat between them, not an enemy, not a bridge, just a weight. A second figure appeared at the edge of the yard, moving without haste. The same man from last night, the one with the badge and the careful voice. He wore the same dark coat, though the daylight showed its worn seams. He stopped near the walkway and waited where he could be seen without forcing himself into the frame. Althea's throat tightened again. The convoy had been a nightmare's punctuation last night. Now he looked like a person who had also slept badly. He called softly. Althea's fingers curled around the door edge. She wanted to close it. She wanted to be alone. She wanted to rewind an hour and ask no questions and drive home with chicken and a mind still believing in quiet safety. But the world did not rewind. It only asked what you would carry forward. Harrow turned and stiffened when he saw the man. His posture changed, the way trained bodies change around authority even when no one speaks it aloud. The man walked a little closer and stopped at the bottom step. He looked at Harrow briefly, then back to Althea. I'm Special Agent Mercer, he said. We didn't properly introduce ourselves last night. Althea did not offer her hand. My wrists still remember you, she thought. Though Mercer hadn't touched her, the body didn't keep accurate records, it kept emotional ones. What do you want? Althea asked. Her voice was steady now, in that frighteningly calm way it got when something inside had gone very quiet. Mercer nodded as if he'd expected the question. I came to explain why we were there and to apologize for the way it happened. An explanation won't heal it, but you deserve to know. Althea waited. She felt Harrow's presence beside the porch rail like an anxious shadow. Mercer looked past her for a moment toward the interior of the house, then back to her face. Last week he said there was credible information about a threat connected to your role, not public, not a headline, something quiet and specific. We initiated protective measures without intending to disrupt your life. Althea's stomach turned. So you were watching? Mercer did not deny. Yes, ma'am. The word watching reached into her living room and made it feel smaller. She thought of herself in pajamas getting water at midnight, thinking she was alone. She thought of how she'd been raised to lock doors and still the world found ways in. You didn't tell me, Althea said. Mercer's jaw tightened. We attempted contact through secure channels. Your office believed it would alarm you unnecessarily. They were wrong. They were wrong, Althea repeated, tasting the simplicity of it all, that authority, and still a failure to trust her with her own fear. Last night, Mercer continued, we were tracking a vehicle that had circled the neighborhood earlier. We were close enough to respond quickly when the traffic stop escalated. We intervened. Escalated, she almost laughed. It would have sounded like breaking glass. So I wasn't saved because someone respected me, she said. I was saved because someone was already looking at me. Mercer's eyes held hers. That's true, he said quietly, and I'm sorry. Sorry didn't open the night, sorry didn't warm the cuff, sorry didn't stop her mother from hearing terror in her own voice through an unanswered phone. Althea looked at Harrow and saw him staring at the ground. His shoulders were drawn inward as if he'd like to fold into something smaller than the harm. Mercer followed her gaze. We'll need formal statements, he said, but not today. Today I wanted to offer something else. Althea's lips pressed together. What? Mercer reached into his coat and pulled out a small envelope, not official looking, no seal, just paper and a name handwritten in careful block letters. In it, he said, is the direct number to my cell and to the duty agent assigned to you. If you want protection you can choose it, if you don't you can say no, but either way you'll be the one deciding. Althea stared at the envelope. Her name on it looked foreign and intimate, like it had been written for someone sick in a hospital, not for a woman who led people into places that demanded steel. Choice. The word hit hard. The night before she'd had almost none. She took the envelope. The paper was warm from Mercer's pocket, a ridiculous detail that made her eyes sting. Thank you, she said, and hated that gratitude still rose automatically, even now, even here. Mercer nodded. Once he seemed about to say something else, something human. Maybe he wanted to tell her he had a sister or a mother or a memory of being small and afraid, but he didn't. He kept his distance and respected the silence. Harrow cleared his throat. He whispered to Althea, I should go. Althea looked at him and saw the young man. He still was beneath the uniform he'd worn like borrowed skin. She saw his fear, not of punishment but of being the kind of person who could do something wrong and live with it. She held the envelope against her palm, the paper cut a little at the edge. Go, she said gently. Harrow nodded and stepped back down the porch steps. He paused at the bottom and looked up. I won't forget your face, he said. Althea did not answer. She watched him walk away until he reached his car and drove off slowly like someone carrying something fragile. Mercer waited a beat longer, then he too turned and left without taking anything else from her yard. The street grew quiet again, not peaceful, quiet like a room after a funeral. Althea stood in the doorway with the door still open and the air moving in and out. She could hear her own breathing. She could hear the house settling. She could hear her heart insist on continuing. She went inside and locked the door. Then she unlocked it again and locked it once more, as if repetition could convince her that metal could keep the world out. In the kitchen, she opened the refrigerator and stared at the empty shelf where dinner should have been. She found nothing but a jar of pickles and a bowl of apples gone soft. She pressed her forehead to the cool inside wall of the fridge and let the cold meet her skin. In her pocket, her phone buzzed. Her mother again. Althea didn't answer right away. She stood there in the hum of the appliance and listened to the small steady machinery that kept things from spoiling. She thought of the envelope on the counter, her name on it. She thought of the porch boards that would creak again the next time she stepped out, as if nothing had changed. And she knew with a clarity that felt like grief settling into a permanent room that every ordinary day from now on would be a practice performance of safety. The locks, the smiles, the calm voice, the questions swallowed whole. She closed the refrigerator door gently so the light disappeared.